Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Debrief, a weekly Q&A show from Sandals Church and Pastor Matt Brown, bringing real answers to tough questions. I'm Justin Pardee, hanging out with my friend Stephanie, Supersport Schaefer.
Stephanie Schaefer.
And we got PMB, Pastor and Matt Brown.
Still don't love Supersport, but I'm the PMB.
I'm sticking with it. What's a better, the SS? SDS.
Stephanie Dolores Schaefer.
Oh,
SDS.
Well, legally I'm Stephanie Keene Schaefer, but...
Dolores, no, you're not.
I let Dolores go.
The law's wrong. I fought the law.
I let Dolores die.
Dolores never dies.
Yeah, we keep her on our hearts, dude.
Okay.
We serve a God of resurrection.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, hey, we have got a great show of all kinds of money topics. Specifically, we have many money topics to cover today. Actually, one topic is just money.
Yes, that's right. Pastor Matt talked about money in his sermon during back to school this weekend, so we have so many questions.
Coffee. This is my third cup.
Yeah, you can tell.
I did spin class this morning.
Wow.
See, we're both bringing our A game in different ways.
Good for you guys. All right.
3 cups of coffee and I'm spinning. I'm still spinning.
Oh, gosh. Well, our Debrief support team was out at all of our Sandals Church locations this last weekend, signing up new people for the show. So if this is your first time listening to the Debrief, welcome, friends. We're so glad that you are joining us. We've got a great show in store. We're excited that you're here.
Yes, welcome to the green side, the other side of the fence where everything is bright. And we're glad to have you.
Yeah. Are you just making awkward eye contact with him on YouTube right now?
Nope. Okay. Should we do some reviews, some feedback?
Let's absolutely do some reviews and feedback.
You guys, one of our most favorite things to get here on the show are 5-star reviews and feedback, and we've got some awesome ones. Stephanie, you got to do the first one because of the title. It's unfair for me to read.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is how I spend most of my day at work, is because PRD said so. They gave a 5-star review. This one comes from T-Zog.
T-Zog, dude.
Who says, for real though, despite Justin Pardee plugging the 5-star review like a madman, tell us about it. The Debrief is worthy of 5 stars. I'm on the road a lot, driving around the IE, and the highlight is always Wednesday when I get to listen to an hour of comedy and wisdom. There's nothing quite like the Debrief. Thank you for this Christ-centered, God-enriching show.
Listen, T-Zog says he gave that 5-star review despite my constant nagging. I believe he only did it because of the nagging. So just check yourself. Check your own heart. Maybe do some introspection. Sign up for some soul care. We have another one from Amy Brake. Don't do that if you're driving right now. She says, makes my day better. Hey, do you guys remember the commercials? Speaking of making my day better. When I was a small child, probably not a small child, teenage elementary, they had commercials for these things called Australian toaster biscuits, which was basically like Australia's competition to English muffins.
Did you guys have like stolen cable?
Yeah. No, they're called Australian toaster biscuits. And then they would show these amazing, tasty little Australian toaster biscuits to English kids, put them in a commercial, and you'd have like this little British boy being like, where's all the nooks and crannies?
Was it
maybe next week, just 2 cups of coffee.
Yeah, let's...
No, this one...
Do you think it was actually an English muffin commercial?
No, it's an Australian toaster biscuit. They're saying these are so much better. And this one little girl, she goes, it makes my mouth water. It was so awesome. Anyways, this review makes me day better. All right. The Debrief has probably single-handedly saved my life from death by boredom. Yeah,
Amen.
We got you. I have a job that starts at 5:30.
With the exception of that commercial you just gave for a product that probably doesn't even exist.
Right now, everyone is going on YouTube looking for this commercial, and I guarantee you it's going to brighten up their day. As if it could be any brighter than the wisdom that's about to come their way. I have a job that starts at 5:30 in the morning, is physically challenging, but for the first 2 hours, it's mind-numbingly tedious. The Debrief challenges my mind, while your banter makes me laugh. Thank you for making the hardest part of my day a bit better and seemingly a bit quicker. From Amy.
I'm so curious to know what Amy does for a job.
Yeah, Amy, let us know.
Yeah, send in a question at debrief.show. We'd love to just know what you do.
Great. All right.
Super cool. I met this guy at back to school night who is the general manager at Best Buy.
Oh.
Yeah, and so he was just singing the praises of this thing. He's a really cool dude.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So if you need help subscribing to the show, just stop by the Geek Squad, I guess, and ask somebody, and they will help you out. Okay, Pastor Matt, before we jump into some questions, you watched a movie on the iTunes store last night that's, speaking of money, a great deal, a 99-cent movie rental.
Yeah, it's 99 cents. I think it's by Martin Scorsese, which he's a little weird. But the movie is about Christian missionaries to Japan. And so
it's called Silence?
Yeah, it's called Silence. And so if you grow up in liberal America, everything about missionaries to third world countries is all about colonialism, and it's really, really in a negative light. And so what Martin Scorsese does really well is I think he really portrays the sincerity of the faith of those who gave up everything to share the gospel in Japan. It is a brutal movie. I mean, there were parts where I was just crying, parts where I was just terrified, heartbroken with what missionaries went through. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not going to spoil it, but there are Christians that are faithful and there are Christians that lose their faith. And both are awful. Watching those who are faithful to the very end being tortured and just literally brutalized in death. It's awful. And then others who abandon the faith. I mean, they literally walk away from Jesus and renounce their faith in Christ. And that's what they had to do in Japan to remain alive. And it's just heart-wrenching. But I think it's challenging. It'll cause you to look at your own faith and what we go through in the very, very small levels of persecution. You know, like for me, I get annoying comments and negative feedback, and I'm looking at these people being starved, brutalized, beaten, beheaded, crucified. I mean, the Japanese were thorough in trying to root out what they considered to be an infection in their pure culture in that time. And I didn't realize how many Japanese initially responded positively to the gospel. So I need to brush up on my Japanese history, but it was pretty amazing.
So that's a PMAT recommendation, movie recommendation.
Yeah, like if
Sounds
you
like a definite
get a bowl of
let's go.
popcorn and just some Kleenexes, because it will be challenging. But again, it's made by Hollywood. I was really, really surprised. And again, be prepared to watch people die for their faith and be prepared to watch people walk away. And ultimately, that's what happens in life. You know, some people are willing to give it all for Jesus, and some people, when the rubber meets the road, they're not willing to give anything for Jesus. So check out that movie. It's 99 cents.
Yeah, there you go. A bowl of popcorn and a box of Kleenexes also needs to be present every time Lindy and I have a real conversation together. That's crucial ingredients. Okay, so we, before we jump into the money questions, it's time for follow-up where we're going to ask questions about answers to questions. Pastor Matt, you ready for?
So my answers cause more questions. Yes.
Here we go.
All right. So Jenna wrote in and she says, I know you mentioned the last 2 weeks have been rough in the criticism department. And as a teacher, sometimes I have some difficult critics for students or parents. I really want to learn to be able to grow from criticism because I know that I'm far from perfect. But how do we navigate through criticism that we should listen to and the criticism we should ignore?
Okay, great question. Thank you for that. See, listen, I think all of us have a threshold of criticism that we are able to manage. And so, you know, anytime you have a platform, you're going to be criticized. If you don't want to be criticized, do nothing, say nothing, own nothing. That's just the reality. You literally can't do any of those three things. Otherwise, you're going to be criticized.
And a platform doesn't just have to be like what you have on the weekends.
No, yeah.
A platform can be, you know, standing on the other side of a counter from somebody during a retail experience.
Yeah, and just be prepared for all of you who are, you know, aspiring to have a social media platform. If you get big enough, you're going to get trolls and they're going to come after you. That's just the reality. So you need to be prepared. So like I said, teachers are brutally criticized in our society. A, we don't respect them. And B, we don't value the information that they are, you know, giving us.
Right,
And we need to. And that's just part of the problem in our society is we've not done well respecting those who are in authority above us. And whether you're left or right or whatever, it's just a problem. So the first thing is just kind of understand your threshold for criticism, because I don't think once we get past what we can handle, we can't even handle honest feedback. And so that's where I get to the place where I feel like I just have this emotional sunburn, and any amount of touching just is painful and awful. And so that just kind of piled up. So when I'm healthy and when you're healthy, I think you need to ask two questions. Number one, is it truthful? And then if it is, you know, listen to it and change what you need to, because we're never going to change unless people are willing to speak truth into our lives. And so just ask yourself, okay, am I willing to hear this? And so I got some criticism actually from one of my kids this week after the message, and I was kind of like, ugh, but I'm recovering from my sunburn. But ultimately, I needed to hear what my daughter was saying, because she felt like I was overly critical of millennials and young people. And if you're under the age of 25, look, I love you, I care for you, I want to challenge you. Unfortunately, you've grown up and not been challenged, and so any kind of challenging or teasing feels bad. And I don't want you to feel bad. I want you to be a good follower of Christ. So I love you guys. Thank you for listening. Hang in there. I'll try to be more positive. So I had to listen to that, and I had to listen to that feedback. But it was on a Sunday afternoon, and that's not usually the best time for me to receive criticism or immediately following the message for all of those of you who love me. So maybe save that for later and share it with PRD.
Just asking for a friend, when is the best time for you to receive criticism?
Tuesdays.
Okay, Stephan.
Tuesdays.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Stephanie's got a list for you after the show.
Yeah. So you know, is it true? And then listen, and then what can you change about it? And then the next thing is it not true? And really, really press into this. And oftentimes what we do is we go to our friends who are not going to be any more truthful with us than we want to be with ourselves, because your friends don't want to tell you. You know, it's like when my wife asked me, does this look good on me? That's always a dangerous question.
Sure.
So we've really had to work through, do you want honest feedback or not? Because, you know, some things look good on some people and they don't look good on others. They don't accentuate the physique that God's given you, and some things look great. And so we've had to work through that. And And I've had to work through that too. Hey, what do you think about this? And, I want some honest feedback. And so that's the biggest thing is surround yourself with people that love you and will give you honest feedback. So, and if it's not true, forget it and move on. And so those are the two things that I would really, really challenge you to do. And so, when people are criticizing you as a person, man, I usually would let that go. When people just say, Matt Brown is, okay, just let that go. But if Matt Brown said something or done something, those are things I need to look at and I need to evaluate it because I can change that. And I can say, hey, I'm really sorry for what I said or what I did. But it's hard for me to apologize, for who I am as a person. Like if someone doesn't like me, how do I work through that?
Yeah.
How do I change me? But if someone says, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel, I can work through that.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the advantages of being in a small group here at Sandals Church is that you get plugged into and connected to these kind of relationships. And I've been around enough that I've been in enough different small groups that there are a lot of people in my life who, there's a few who know me very, very, very intimately, but there's a lot of people who know me really pretty well. So if I get criticism or even a challenge in a particular area, I can almost go to somebody who's got an area of expertise. And I actually did that this morning on the way to work. I saw somebody at a coffee shop, an older guy who I respect his wisdom a ton. And I said, here's something I've been thinking about. This is an area of expertise for you. Does that make sense?
Right.
And it was really, really helpful. So
yeah, I've actually got a follow-up question for you. You mentioned that sometimes criticism can get overwhelming. You kind of get that sunburn of like, if one more person says one more thing, how do you go about kind of recovering from that and getting back to a place where you can receive criticism again?
Yeah, so what that means is I'm out of balance. So right now it's kind of weird. So I went through this lull and I'm in the book of Jeremiah. And if you haven't read the book of Jeremiah, like he's totally depressed, sad. He's called the weeping prophet. So part of that I feel like is my encouragement right now is coming from a really, really depressed guy. And so that's not to say don't read Jeremiah. I think you should read Jeremiah because he's the most real of any person in the Bible other than Jesus. Mm-hmm. And then probably Paul's third. So he's the most authentic about how he's feeling. He doesn't just communicate the message that God gives him. He also communicates how he feels about it. And that's incredible. What a gift. And sometimes our faith is difficult to live out. So I feel like part of that's true is I'm going through Jeremiah and it's just really, really difficult. There's some beautiful passages in there, some really, really bold predictions about the coming Messiah and how we're hoping in that, but some really, really dire things. And so I think that's part of it. I think also it's the natural flow of things. I got to speak at Saddleback Church. And so that's the other thing is I am an emotional person. So if you come to hear me preach and you like me preaching, I am not boring on stage, right? That's not who I am. So people that are like super like, what's the word when they communicate and it's just like the monotone, right? Those people don't probably have a lot of downs because they don't have a lot of ups. And so I'm just one of those persons that's all over the place emotionally. And so I just have to check myself. I have to go get rest. And I have to feed my soul. And so for me, it's just taking a step back. My wife and I went up to the mountains, just try to do some things. We're away from everybody. We shut off our phones. I just shut off my phone because some people, because of technology, people have, 24/7 access to us. And so you just got to get away and hang out. And my wife and I, we just went on a little boat ride up at Lake Arrowhead, and it was just so peaceful and relaxing to just sit for an hour. And, that's what Psalms 46:10 says, be still and know that I'm God. And so I just had to walk through that. And, we are, I pastor a mega church. I have a big family, 2 kids going to college, 1 son going to high school. Teenagers are challenging. Life's tough. And so we had to work through that. So Tammy and I just needed to get some time away, and I need to process, and I need to work through that. So that's what I would do is figure out what refreshes you, as long as it's not sin, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't go do something sinful because some of you run to porn, some of you run to drugs, some of you run to spending, some of you run to eating. So I'm looking at you.
I know. I looked away.
Yeah.
I looked away.
So do something that's healthy and something that actually fulfills you and something that's beautiful. So run to that. And so that's what I do.
Well, thanks for that follow-up question, Jenna.
Yeah.
We love questions about answers to questions. I'm trying the monotone thing to see if it
Yeah,
will
don't
work.
do that.
No?
Yeah.
No.
But the conversation doesn't have to stop here, guys. So anytime you have some follow-up questions on what you hear on the show, we would love to get those questions on. You can always send those in at debrief.show or by sending us a message on Facebook.
Speaking of questions, it is time to debrief the sermon. We went back to school on finances this weekend. You talked about learning to be wise, and we've got a literal pile. We've got a gazillion. I'm trying to think of a money term. A gazillion. We've got a taped wad of bills full of questions. and all financially related. No, there's no money term for a large quantity of things.
I've always wanted to do
stack?
that. You know, like a drug dealer, just have like a wad of hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how pastors roll.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So
I got a wad of bills.
this first question actually came from our good old friend, the discussion guide at the bottom of the sermon. And
Yes.
question number 4 on there says, are you content with your current financial situation? Why or why not? Pastor Matt, we're pushing that over to you.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, there's always room to make a little bit more money. And so for me, what I look at is how can I do that? And so for me, it's just, can I speak someplace else? Can I do some writing? How am I able to do that? And so I think we all need to think critically and ask ourselves, okay, if I'm not content and I need to make a little bit more, how can I do that? Ultimately, my contentment needs to come in Christ, but I don't think ambition is a bad thing if your heart is not to love money and things, if your heart is to love God and give more. And so one of my wife and I's goals is that our largest check every single month would be to the church. So right now, our largest check is still our house payment. And so we're quickly approaching the day where the largest check I write every month will be to this church. And I'm super excited about that. I love this church. I love what we're doing. I love seeing people get real. And so that's my heart. And so my desire for more money is not for more things. It's to have more impact on the kingdom and to be able to bless people. And that's how I always think, like when my kids are going to college, I don't think, this is just how God wired me. I don't think, how do I get money from my kids to go to college? I think about, man, what could I do that could bless thousands of parents with money so their kids could go to college? Like, that's just how God's wired me. I'm just a big thinker.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been that way. And, I think the kind of, prayers that God blesses is, those prayers that say, God, I want to do something good with my life and with my money, and I want to have an impact, and I want to bless others. And for me, I want to bless others. I just don't want to feed someone's stomach. I want to feed their soul. Like, that's what I want to do. And I want to give to people, and I want to see people blessed. And that's where the most meaning has come from my life. So I'm always looking for ways to make a little bit more money and generate a little bit more money. And I don't think it's the church's responsibility to do that. Like, God's given me gifts and talents, and I'm able to do some other things to make that happen. Like I said, I flipped a couple houses. We've done some investments. We've purchased a couple of properties, and some things have worked and some things haven't. But Lord has blessed us, and I've been able to be consistently wise with my money. And
Yeah, you know what? One of the things I love about that goal you just said about making your largest check towards the church is that it, that's really going to keep you in check long term. Like as you grow and income increases, like you would think. I think a lot of us do. Like, hey, we could afford a nicer house or this or that, but that particular goal would limit you in saying, even though we could afford it, we're not necessarily going to upgrade because we want to keep.
A guy really impacted me. When I first started ministry, I was in Huntington Beach, and one of my good friends, Brent, there at the church, I'll never forget it. So he was a young guy at the time, probably about your age, mid-30s, and I was early 20s. And he said, my prayer is that my tithe will pay your salary. I couldn't believe that. We were in this community group, small group, and that was his prayer. He wanted to make enough money so he could cover the entire expense of ministers and pastors and eventually the whole staff. Like, that was his dream. His dream was to be able to make enough money that he could provide for his ministers and pastors. And a couple of weeks ago, we looked at that, all the verses on honoring your teachers and those who teach you the truth, they should share in all good things. And it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to do that. I love to be able to take staff out to dinner, missionaries out to dinner, and to be able to bless people who serve the Lord. That's my greatest joy. My greatest joy is just blessing people financially. I just enjoy doing that. And I got that idea from this rich guy in Orange County who said the driving desire of his heart wasn't a bigger house, wasn't a better car. It was to take care of his church. And he and I are still friends. I mean, it's been 25 years. We're still friends. I've watched him through the ups and downs of, his financial roller coaster, but he has always remained faithful to the church. And that's just such a beautiful thing. So
Awesome.
That's cool. All right. This next question comes from Tuyuzer, who says she's been watching your sermons online for the past 5 weeks. And the question I have is about whether I should only give to the church. Is giving to a family member or a friend who has a need still tithing that is honoring God?
Yeah, so I get this question all the time. And really, so thank you for your question. But the question really comes from biblical ignorance. Benevolence, giving to those who are in need, and tithing are different things. We give to the Lord. So my offering is to God. And specifically in Deuteronomy, it says to the place where his name is honored. And so charity is not generosity to God. It's considered two separate things. So people ask me all the time, hey, listen, this family's in need. I'm going to give them a check. instead of the church. And here's the reality. If everybody would give to the church, we could write those checks to those families. But people decide to give everywhere else. And so the church is constantly struggling because, and here's what it really comes down to is people want the gratification and the glory for helping someone else. When what I want is, and what Tammy and I want is, we want God to get the glory. So I want to give all my resources to the church so that the church can meet that need.
Yep.
I love to, sit down with a single mom who can't write the check for rent that month for multiple reasons. I love single moms. My heart goes out to you. You guys are working so hard. And I love to be able to say, hey, let the church, and I always say this, let the church take care of this month. Let God take care of this. I never say me, because I want God to get the glory and I want his church to be honored. And that's my heart and that's my desire, is that God would get the glory and God is glorified through the church. And so I just think that's really, really important. And it's something that we do. I think that you should be able to do both. And so I give to the Lord, and occasionally I give to benevolence. Tammy and I also give to missionaries. So we do three things. We have charity. So that's generosity to poor people. We have our tithe that we give to the church, and then we also have our missions giving. And again, what I want is I want the amount of money that I give every single year of my life to increase and to grow. And man, that's just been such a blessing for me. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Giving to family is not giving to God. That's actually a responsibility that you have. So you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. And if you don't know who Peter and Paul are, they're two apostles in the Bible. And that's just an old saying. You can't rob God to pay somebody else. So what you need to do is you need to orchestrate your finances so you can have a little extra and you can help people out in a time of need. Like, for example, what's happening in Houston. I'm not going to take away from sandals to give to Houston.
Right.
Why would I do that? I mean, think about that. Well, that's the same philosophy. Well, I'm not going to make my house payment so I can make my electric bill payment, or I'm not going to pay my house payment so I can pay, my Vegas trip payment, right? You don't do that. You need to sit down, get in the finance class, be honest with what you can afford, and start moving forward in that direction. And so give to God what is God's. And that's what Jesus says, render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. And so we need to do that. And so don't rob one to pay the other. And so I know some of you guys are in a bad financial situation. You didn't get there overnight. You're not going to get out of there overnight.
Right.
But don't rob God to pay someone else. Just don't do that. And Tammy and I remember specifically one year we didn't have enough money for diapers. We had two kids, both in diapers, and diapers are expensive. Those of you who haven't been there in a while, they cost a lot of money, and you get to use them once, right? They're all crapped out, literally. Sorry. And it was just really, really difficult. And I just remember I told my wife, she was crying. We had started Sandals Church. We were dead broke. Nobody had any money. No money was coming in. And I just said, this is one of those moments. And I'll never forget it. We wrote our tithe check, which at the time was about $200, and it was all the money we had. But we wanted to make that deal. And that week at church, we had one guy who had a job. His name was Grandpa Jack. Or he actually didn't have a job. He's on retirement income. And he gave us a gift card that week to Kmart for $200. Do you know what Kmart sold?
Yeah.
Diapers.
Yep.
So God was good. And I was so grateful. And that was just such a huge moment for Tammy and I. And it was awesome.
Stephanie knows this because she's in my community group, but we actually, Lindy and I, we had just had a kind of a really similar amazing experience where we had extra income come in, and we decided to support a family that's getting ready to go be missionary. And then as we're getting ready for back to school, we got an anonymous check in the mail 2 or 3 weeks ago.
That's awesome.
And it was right the day before we were trying to go back to school, and there was cash in there that covered the back to school expenses. Just totally amazing.
Yeah.
It's cool. All right, this next question comes from Kelsey. Great sermon this week about money. 2 years ago, my husband and I made a commitment to give 10% of every paycheck to the Lord. One question we asked ourselves, though, is should we be giving 10% of our paycheck before or after taxes?
Right, and so there are various opinions on this. And so here's the problem. So the principle of tithing comes from Israel in the Old Testament, where they are tithing to the Lord, but they are also living in a government that honors God and follows God. So we are not living in a theocracy. God is not the president of the United States. So we live in a government, and if you're like me, they take a considerable amount of your income.
They do.
And so the problem is it's impossible to figure out what to do. And so, if we had a letter to those in Babylon who are, having to pay those taxes. And so here's what I would say. You need to go before the Lord as a couple and say, God, what do you want from us? And I believe God will give you a sense of peace about either. But anybody who's legalistic about it should be before taxes or after taxes. There's just not biblical evidence for that. And so just really, really pray about it as an individual and say, God, I want to honor you and I want to honor this principle. And just know for me, Tammy and I believe that 10% is a starting place. Now, some of you, there's no way you can do that. But that's where Tammy and I started. It's not where we finished. We don't feel like 10% is the cap. And so just really, really go to God and say, God, I want to be generous and I want to bless you and answer me in this. What are we specifically to do? I can tell you this, if everybody in our church tithe after taxes, we would be rolling. And we're not rolling because the vast majority, I think about 26% of our church gives on a regular basis. Now, before you're super critical, remember a lot of people that come are not believers, and that's okay. When we don't want their money, God wants their hearts. So the most important thing is their soul. So don't be critical of all the people present on the weekends because we're all at different places on our walk with God. Some of us haven't even started it yet. So I would just sit down and really, really pray about, but I've looked at it. It's just really, really difficult to definitively say before taxes or after taxes. I will say this, that the Bible talks about first fruits. Now, some people say that means that we should pay God with ultimately what we make. What I believe is it doesn't necessarily mean that. What it means is we should pay God first and not last. So God should get your first check, not your last check. And so that's the principle of that. I don't pay God with leftovers. Remember, we talked about we eat leftovers, but we give God our firsts.
Yeah.
And so.
You know, what Lindy and I have done, we've just tried to keep it simple. So we do after tax because I know what that number is. I see it when it comes in, and it's easy for me to do the math. And if I make it any more complicated, we could very easily forget. And we've been able to automate it by doing it that way. But then we also, like when we get if we get a tax refund, which we have the last 2 years, we're going to tithe on that thing too. And all those extra
that's key. So just remind yourself of that. If they choose that, when you get that tax refund, that's now income that you've not tithed on. And so you need to make sure that you do that. So that's important. Whereas if you're the other way and you tax before, you don't need to tax or you don't need to tithe on your refund because you've already taxed on 100% of what you got, and the government's simply giving some of that back. Now, certainly you're able to do that if you want to, but
yeah. We do it this way because I'm barely good enough at math to keep my family from going poor, from going broke. So that's why we do it. We just did it to keep it simple.
Fair enough. All right, this next question comes from Ryan. He says, when my wife and I got married, we combined all things financial, and I became the primary overseer of our monthly bills. This includes our tithe. Recently, though, after talking with my wife, I came to realize that I'm more or less robbing her of the personal experience of tithing. What are some ways you could recommend that we could each experience giving, but also have it be something we're doing together? Or is giving together even an important thing to try to achieve?
Well, I don't know that I fully understand the question. So he's paying the bills, so he's writing the tithe check. So here's what I do is if my kids are ever sitting with me in church, I have them put it in the offering plate because I want them to see it and them to participate in it. My wife doesn't care about the bills. She never thinks about it twice because I handle all of that. So, but if she came to me and said, hey, I feel like I want to be a part of this, then I would just give the check to her every single week and say, hey, turn it in. So, but I don't even turn a check in during the week. Ours goes through bill pay. And it comes to the church. I've never even seen the check. Yeah. So I don't even know what it looks like. One
thing Christina Crowley, who was leading worship here at Hunter Park this last weekend, did when she was doing the call to offering after the sermon, and she just quickly said, hey, some of you guys automate your giving and you don't write the check just like us. She's like, don't just pass the blue bucket by, just grab onto it, hold on to it for a quick second and say a prayer. And you can either say a prayer of thanks, a prayer of blessing, and then she even encouraged people, man, why don't you say a prayer for other people who are wanting to move to this place where they're honoring God? That could be, that could be an option for you guys.
Christina Crowley's so wise.
She is. She's got that husband too. Okay, so here's a question. So it sounds like Ryan and his wife are kind of on the same page here. What if you have a husband and a wife who are not on the same page when it comes to giving to the church or tithing or that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I would say a lot of couples aren't on the same page about finances, period. not just giving to the church, spending at the mall, the kind of car that you drive. And so finances is one of those issues that is extraordinarily difficult to work through. And so the first thing that you need to do is sit down and have a conversation, an open, honest conversation. Because, a lot of times when Tammy and I talk about all kinds of issues, we're not on the same page. And so we have to be able to work through that and navigate that.
When we have Tammy on an upcoming show, let's go through a list of all those areas where you're not on the same page.
Yeah, no, let's not do that. So, so just know that it's very, very difficult. It's easy to love each other when you agree. It's difficult to love each other when you disagree. And so that's where we have to sit down and just really, really say, okay, here's how I'm feeling. And you got to take the emotion out. You got to take the anger out. And you got to talk about the issue. Don't talk about each other. And so the reality is, that was good. Talk about the issue. Don't talk about each other.
Yeah.
And so here's how I'm feeling. And so Tammy and I, she grew up in a home where her parents did not go to church on a regular basis. So tithing was never talked about.
Yeah.
I grew up in a home where I tithed as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I got $1 allowance. I put a dime in the envelope and turned it into the church. My parents taught me that. And I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity. And so it was a beautiful thing. So we had to talk about that because 10% of our income when we first got married was a lot of money for us. And it was very, very difficult. And so we had to work that out. Ultimately, she was on board, wanted to honor God after she understood the biblical principle. And by the way, I don't think that we are mandated to tithe as born-again Christians. I think we're blessed by tithing. And so just know we're saved by grace, not by works. So I don't want any questions about, I thought we weren't under the law. We're under the law, but we're under grace. We are under grace. But I think, why wouldn't you want to do what God blesses? I need my money to be blessed. I want my money to be blessed. God promises in Malachi that he blesses tithing. So I don't have a lot of money. I need it all blessed. So I do that, and we made that decision. So here's what I would say is sit down and talk about finances and have an honest, open conversation. Look, some people are never going to agree. And let me just tell you, the issue isn't money. The issue is selfishness. That's what you're dealing with. Whenever you have conflicts that are not resolved in marriage, it's because it's not a marriage problem. It's a selfish problem. That's that's the bottom line. And so you just have to be willing to say, okay, I am super selfish in this area. And ultimately, you may have to get to the place where as a couple, you agree to disagree. And what you do is you split your finances. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a fail. But for the health of the marriage and the safety of the marriage, maybe you do separate finances and you agree. You pay these, I pay that. But sometimes, man, that doesn't even work because somebody's so bad at finances, then they don't pay those things. I mean, it's real issues. So there are some times where you can't agree to disagree because if you have somebody that's literally ruining their credit, ruining your credit, not paying, I mean, that's a sin that needs to be confronted ultimately because it's stealing from the family.
Yeah.
Their selfishness is stealing from the family. So take the class, understand some biblical principles, understand what God wants to teach you about money, and let's just be honest. Most of us were not raised to be wise with money. We're just not. Our culture is not honest about money. We don't buy things that we can afford. We don't want to be held accountable for our stupid decisions when it comes to money. We want somebody else to pick up the tab and pay for it. We learned that, during the 2008 crisis, right? Everybody else who didn't blow it has to pay off those who did. It's just really tragic how our culture lacks accountability when it comes to finances. And so be that way. But ultimately, for a season, as you work through it, maybe you just say, okay, well, I'm going to tithe on what I make. And so, especially if you have a spouse that's not a believer, I think that's what you need to do. You can't force your non-believing spouse to give to the church. I don't think that's honoring them.
Right.
Because God doesn't want money that's given by force. He wants money that's given out of love because of his grace. And so that's what he wants. And so God loves a hilarious giver and cheerful giver. So have a real conversation. And by the way, dating couples, start talking about money now because you're going to fight over it. It's going to happen. You're two different people. You're going to be on different pages from time to time. So learn to talk about that. Learn, to really evaluate, hey, what's important to me? Because for some people, the car they drive is more important than their church. It just is. They don't want to say that, but it is. Where they eat out is more important. The clothes they wear is more important. The coffee they drink is more important. And our money shows what we value. It does. It points to what we worship. It's why Jesus said you can't worship both God and money. You got to choose. Yeah. And so, that's a real issue. So sit down, have an honest conversation, and just say, hey, could we go get help? Could we go get help and sit down with somebody else? Because maybe if you're too hostile with each other, you can bring in a third party, a counselor, through one of these classes that we offer at Sandals Church. And a couple that's been through it said, man, we've been there.
Totally.
But here's the other side. Here's what the other side looks like. Because once you get out of debt and once you start living on a budget, you have more money. But when you're, you're constantly broke, it's a mess. So trust God's principle, trust God's truth, and he's going to lead you in a way to be better with your money. And so, man, just know that money is a difficult conversation. But what I always told my wife when we talked about it is I care more about you than I do about money. So I want to hear your heart. I want you to hear mine. And at the end, I want to lead our household, out of love and respect for who you are and what you are. And so ultimately it came down for my wife and I, it was an issue of trust. Not just, her struggle trusting God, but her struggle trusting me. And I had to earn that and be faithful and be transparent and be open and be honest. So
3 practical tips before we move on based on things Pastor Matt just said. Number 1, we have 2 finance classes at Sandals Church. The first one costs $10. It's called Finding Financial Freedom, and it's 1 day. The other one is called Financial Peace University. Costs like 100 something bucks. And that is like 9 weeks. Okay, there you go. You can sign up for those online at our website. Do you know where that is? If not,
we actually made a short link to the page that has both of those classes at move.sc/finances. We'll also throw that in the show notes this week.
Perfect.
But you'll find both of those listed with all of our other support groups here at Sandals Church. Those 2 are also listed on that page.
So you should totally get started there. But then we also offer marriage mentoring. So you just talked about working this through with a couple that's gone down the road. That is an option that you can do here. Is the marriage page?
Yeah, sandalschurch.com/marriage. We'll get you connected there too.
Boom. If you got a problem, just go to sandalschurch.com, type / and then whatever it
and
is.
see what comes up.
See what happens.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's right. All right. This next question comes in from Annie Moss, also known as Anonymous. It says, my husband and I got a little caught up in the American dream after getting married. In January, we started giving to Sandals on a weekly basis, but we're pretty much living from paycheck to paycheck between our various debts. Is it ever okay to stop giving to the church in order to focus on getting out of debt and paying off some of our poor decisions and then to start giving again?
yeah, absolutely not. What I would encourage you to do is to get another job. Man.
Hold on. I want to clarify something you just said because I like where you're going. A second ago, you said we're not mandated to give, but we're blessed to be able to give. And now you're saying it's absolutely not okay because you're talking about if you want God's blessing, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking about
if you want God's blessing and you want God to bless the process, what giving does Jesus honor? It's the woman who gave all she had. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't pay your bills. Don't become homeless because then that becomes a challenge for the church. So make sure that you pay those bills, and you may need to temporarily lower what you're going to give, but make sure that you give God something to show Him your heart. And so what I did, I shared this story when we started out. Tammy and I, well, not Tammy, I made some dumb financial decisions. What I did is I got a second job, and that was really, really difficult, but that helped remind me not to make those stupid choices again. When I asked God to bail me out from my dumb decisions, I'm going to continue to make those dumb decisions. That's what the fool does. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk a lot about the fool because it's the most often quoted word in the book of Proverbs. The fool blames everybody else for their decisions. And so oftentimes we blame God for our stupidity. So I'm glad that you guys are willing to say, hey, we got caught up in the American dream. Look, everybody's caught up in the American dream. And it's not a dream, it's a nightmare. That's why our debt is trillions and trillions of dollars. So what I would do is say, hey, as a couple, we're going to get some second jobs. You say, well, that means we get to spend less time with each other. Yep, and that's a great way to remind yourself not to do this and figure out how to get yourself out of debt. And Tammy and I have had to make some really, really tough decisions several times. But I tell you, man, getting out of debt is the greatest feeling in the world. It's so free. And Tammy and I have had to work our way through that a couple times, probably 3 times in our marriage, where we made some spending decisions based upon income that we thought was coming and then it didn't come, and oh my goodness, that really, really derailed us. So that's what I would say is sit down, come up with a plan, and it's okay to have to work a little extra to pay off debt. There's nothing wrong with that. Make sure that you're on the same page and make sure it's temporary. Don't then go out and increase your spending because of your new wages. And so that's the thing that I see fools do all the time. They already spend the raise before they get it. That's what a fool does. I'm already spending the money before I get it. And so what I've tried to do over the years is every time I try to get a raise, I try to keep my spending the same. So then I'm able to have this thing called savings, which no one has. And the Bible says that we need to have that and make sure that we can take care of ourselves because we can't be a blessing to others if we're a burden to others. And so make sure that you're in a position to take care of yourself. So great question.
So, side note, that is the whole point of Financial Peace University is literally to teach you how to organize all of this stuff and get out of debt and all that kind of thing. So if it's $120 for the couple or whatever, totally worthwhile investment. Check it out.
Totally.
Oh, hold on. This question comes from Justine, so I'm gonna read it in her honor. What is the rule of thumb for tithing in college? I'm in nursing school, and my fiance is in medical school. We both have many loans and question how much we should tithe or if we should tithe at all, since we don't necessarily have income during school. I understand that it is a blessing to receive loans as a gift from God to continue our education, and therefore we should be intentional with what we give.
Yeah, I don't believe you should tithe at all on loans. That is not income. That is loans that you are using to put yourself through school so that one day you can be a blessing to the Lord. Do not tithe on school loans. We do not want that money You need to utilize that money for your education and to better yourself so that one day you can give to the church. So I would passionately disagree with any religious leader that says that you should tithe on loans. I think that is a bad decision. So.
Man, there was a young guy when we were doing college young adult ministry together stuff. I remember his school situation meant he was not making income like this. So he said, I'm going to make sure that I'm tithing with my time. So he said, so he volunteered a lot during the week because he had the capacity. Now I realize medical school and stuff makes that hard.
Probably not possible.
But I thought it was a really cool thing when he was saying, I know that I can't do this, but I could do this to support
absolutely.
church.
That's a great point.
I thought it was really, really cool. So.
All right, this next one comes in from Callie, who says, I'm retired and have a small pension and Social Security. Am I supposed to tithe on these as they are income, even though I tithed on my gross salary when I worked? I do give to various ministries monthly, but I don't want to steal from God. Can you help clear this up for me?
Yeah, I would encourage you to give something. So, and pray about it. So I don't think that, obviously you need to be able to sustain yourself and pay your rent. And my heart goes out to those of you who are retired and older and living on fixed income. But I think that you don't want to rob yourself of the blessing of giving to the Lord. So give something to God, figure out what you can do. But yes, I do believe that retirement income is something that we should tithe on. So I plan on doing that. Not only do I plan on tithing on my retirement, I'm going to tithe on my estate. So when I die, Tammy and I, we're probably going to double tithe. At least 20% of our estate will go to Sandals Church and to further the gospel, and then 80% is going to go to my kids. And so that's just what I believe in. I don't want to be in heaven thinking I gave all my money to my kids. I want to be in heaven knowing that one of my last acts upon death was that I honored God. So that's what I want to do. And hopefully my kids will be excited about that because we've honored God in life, and I want to honor God in death. And so I think that's a beautiful thing to do. And and I've told my kids if they're all total idiots, I'm giving it all to God. So because again, right? I don't. Here's what I tell my kids: I don't finance foolishness, and I don't finance sin. I don't do those things. So you want to do those things? You are on your own. Enjoy. So
for now.
Yeah.
All right, this question comes from Derek. Not his real name, though. It's in quotes.
Yes.
He says, Dear Debrief crew, and I don't think he's expecting any wisdom from you or I, Stephanie, just to be clear. This is not an attempt at a gotcha question. This is sincere. My question is regarding two topics, marijuana and tithing. I'm a legal marijuana grower since last summer, and I was taken aback by Pastor Matt's comments a few weeks ago regarding the church's stance on the issue. I feel like Sandals has welcomed me, and I'm very grateful to watch online that I'm no longer a California resident. For the last year, I've planned with my wife to finally do our full tithe, plus more to make up for the years where I fell short. My daughter is heavily involved at the church too, doing mission and camp trips, and I want to be able to sponsor other children who can't afford to do these activities in the future. So my question is, does the church still welcome my tithe when it is against the way I make my living?
Okay, so I don't know that I'm against the way that you make your living. I'm against recreational use of marijuana. I am against that. I think that marijuana has some great benefits for people who are suffering. When my uncle was dying of cancer, he lived with us, and I encouraged him to smoke marijuana in our backyard. Every night, he was in my backyard every single night smoking a joint, and I thought that was fine. And my wife and I, we totally agreed that. I did not go out there and smoke the joint with him because I was not dying of cancer. So I think that marijuana has wonderful benefits in certain situations. The problem is, a lot of people, man, I don't know if you guys, but I have seen multiple times in California, I'm driving in the car and the person next to me smoking a joint while driving. And that's a huge, huge problem. And so addiction is an enormous issue in our culture. It's a real, real problem. And a lot of people, I'm telling you, they worship marijuana. They do. And we are called to worship God. I've said this over and over again, that the word for witchcraft in the Greek is pharmakia, where we get our English word pharmacy. And so there's something about a drug-induced stupor that causes us to feel like we're having a spiritual experience. And look, you don't need drugs to get you to heaven. Jesus came from heaven to get you to God. That's what we need, and we need to worship him. And so marijuana is a mind-altering drug. It affects your mind, and it breaks my heart. So I'm okay, and I'm not saying that you're accountable. I don't know how you sell all these things or what that works. But at the end of the day, we need to be very, very clear as a church. Marijuana for recreational use is not okay. It is not okay any more than it's okay to be drunk. Like, I'll have an occasional glass of wine. I do not get drunk. When I feel the effects of wine, I stop drinking every single time because I don't want to make a fool of myself. I don't want to make a fool of my faith. I don't want to allow myself to do stupid things. I just don't want to do that. And again, a lot of young people today, they don't think anything's wrong with marijuana because they are letting culture determine their values. They're letting culture drive what they think rather than Christ. And so we just need to say that. So I'm not opposed to the usefulness for marijuana. I think it has some benefits, and I think it has a lot less side effects than many of the drugs that we take from the doctors. And so I think marijuana has beautiful, wonderful things that can help people for recreational use. Getting stoned because you just want to be stoned, man, it's going to take away your drive. It's going to take away your desires to work, your desires to make a difference. I mean, being stoned, that's just not what God wants. So that's what I mean when I say that. Look, I don't know how marijuana is grown or not grown. I'm not an expert on what's legal or not legal. I'm just saying I am for the use of marijuana to help people. Mm-hmm. When it harms people, which I believe recreational use harms people, I'm opposed to that. So,
so on this last part, for Derek, he says, "Does the church still welcome my tithe?"
I don't make a moral decision on the money that comes in. I have no idea. So, if he's using it to help people, of course we welcome it. Yeah. If he's selling it to kids on the street, no, go get a different job. That's ridiculous. That's sin. You are causing young people to sin. And, don't worship it. I mean, it just breaks my heart, right? People put crosses and marijuana leaves on their bodies. It's just like, good Lord. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm saying is, if it's helping people, man, I'm for it. God's for it.
Cool. Okay. All right, this question comes from Anonymous.
Yeah, well, technically Anonymous.
Oh,
is how they wrote their
Anonymous.
name.
Yeah.
All right, on the theme of financial giving, I would like to know how we as Christians should best respond to panhandling. I've always struggled with the issue, wondering if I'm actually helping or hurting the person. So I've almost always chosen not to give for fear that it's going to be used to purchase alcohol or drugs. But now I'm beginning to see that maybe I've been sinfully judgmental of these people. What's your take on this issue, Pastor Matt?
Yeah, I'm judgmental too. I'm really frustrated with. Really frustrated with the way that we are helping homeless people because I don't think we're helping them at all. I think we continue it, and it's really, really sad. Look, in California, we got to deal with two issues: drug addiction and mental illness. And until we get real with those two issues, which I am all for helping, mental illness and drug addiction, I think we need to go all in on helping those two issues, which is why I'm against recreational marijuana use, because a lot of people who are mentally ill use drugs. They use drugs to feel better, and it doesn't help. It oftentimes hurts.
Or it might help them, help them feel like they feel better, but it doesn't help.
Yeah, no.
Their
So what marijuana does, and let me just say this, even for depression and anxiety, marijuana only temporarily numbs it. What you need to do is get in counseling and work through your anxiety and trust God. And so we're anxiety is the result of you trying to be God in some area of your life. That's what it is. So, okay, how do I hand this issue over to God? I just don't. I don't, man. I just do not help panhandlers. Now, I say that if God tells me to help somebody or to strike up a conversation. And that's what I would say is don't put money out the car. Have a conversation and find out where they are, what they're doing, what's going on before, because here's the people that I want to help. I want to help the people that are in our church that are struggling, that are trying to do the right thing, that are trying to make the right choices. And do you know that we have homeless people in our church that are working hard to not be homeless? Mm-hmm. And so am I going to give my money to this random person on the street corner, or am I going to give my money to Shane? Mm-hmm. Like, we all know who Shane is, right? Yeah. He's fighting. He's trying so hard. And he battles with drug addiction and mental illness. Mm-hmm. He's battling both of those issues, but he's here at church. He's trying so hard to do the right thing. And I feel like as a Christian, my money should go to him and I should help him. And so the issue is who do we help? And so here's how it goes. First, your family, your biological family, then your spiritual family, the church. And then if you have something left over, go and do that. And just know that so much of what we're trying to do to help is not helping anybody. It's making it worse. And so we have to deal with two issues: drug addiction and mental illness. And then, we can deal with a lot of these other people that temporarily find themselves homeless. Those people are actually easy to help.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say something for those of you guys who do give and support Sandals Church. You are making an impact in a real and serious way here. Like, two things. Number one, Pastor Dan Zimbardi our executive pastor, he's serving on the mayor of the city of Riverside's like commission panel or something to end homelessness in the city. So he's invested in trying to solve that problem. Number two, I think next week they have a meeting and they're actually sharing a story of one of the people that we have helped, just like you talked about with Shane, over years and years and years. We've walked alongside him into a job, into a career, with a vehicle. Sandals Church is being used as an example of helping support homelessness. We've got people who deal support at the shelter, the food shelter, but we don't get to celebrate and tell all these stories on stuff because it takes a long, long time to truly help somebody. I just want you to know your church is involved and doing some really big things, but it's the hard, long work that's not like super fun and splashy and sexy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyways, Sandals Church is working hard in this area. So
yeah, totally. All right, this next question comes from Annie Moss, and she says, I'm a stay-at-home mom of 3. Our family of 5 lives in an 875 square foot rental home. We tithe monthly, sponsor Compassion Child, and live as frugally as possible. This simple lifestyle has served us well, but I've had a few people and family members tell me that I'm losing out on financial blessings and not being a good steward by staying home to raise our 3 kids. I have a master's degree and the potential to more than double our income. Do you think there's truth or wisdom in their opinions? Am I not being a good steward by staying home?
Oh, man. So I think that here's the bottom line is what has God called you and your husband to? And that's what you guys need to pray about. First of all, let me say I'm super grateful that you guys are living within your means. I think that's fantastic. You need to make sure that you honor your husband and make sure that he feels like the income is enough because you guys have made this choice to stay at home. At some point, bills get bigger with kids. And at some point, I think your kids are going to get to an age where you can do some work. And I would encourage you to do that at some point. But again, it's about a calling. If God has called you to stay home, then you need to stay at home. And again, make yourself open. What do we say? People are criticizing you. Is what they're saying true? You need to work through that.
Go back to the beginning.
Yeah, go back to the very beginning and work through that. And it's impossible for me to say specifically what God has told you. Tammy and I, we had her stay home for a couple years to get our kids through some things, but then some bills come up, and so now she works part-time at the church, and that helps out for us. So every family has to make that decision, and just remind yourselves, that the Proverbs 31 woman works. So remember that. But that's not to say that if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's not work as well. It's a calling. What has God called you to do? And I mean, Lindy stays home, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
why I work 2 jobs.
You guys have a bazillion kids. How many kids do you have?
4.
Yeah, it feels like 4,000.
Yeah, 4-ish. 4-ish.
4-ish.
Give or take the day.
His kids move quickly.
They do. There.
Yeah. So just know that, that's a personal decision, and people are not allowed to make personal decisions for you. You need to do that. God gave you a brain. God wants you to exercise wisdom. And as long as you guys are okay, 875 square foot home, that's small, but Tammy and I's first home was not even that big. And we could have existed in that. Yeah. So I understand that. So be who God has called you to be within the realm of Scripture. So when someone says, well, God's called me to do this and it doesn't line up with Scripture, that's a problem. God hasn't called you to do this. But what you're doing is within the realm of Scripture, and that's an appropriate decision to make. For a lot of you, though, who are women and you're thinking that one day I want to be a stay-at-home mom, I would strongly discourage master's degrees and those things, because what those things do is they actually make it harder for you to stay at home because you'll have debt. Mm-hmm. So you need to be thinking, what is my lifelong goal? And if your lifelong goal is to be a stay-at-home mom, don't rack up a bunch of debt, because that makes it harder to be a single family income. So you got to be thinking ahead of time, what is the desire of my heart? Now, we don't always know, because sometimes, kids change everything. So
Sure, totally. Okay, we've got 2 last questions left. We're almost at an hour. Pastor Matt, can we try a speed round on you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna enter the Super Sport, Stephanie Schaefer Super Sport speed round. We're gonna give you 2 minutes for each of these last questions. This first one, we're gonna put the clock.
I
we're
can
gonna
do all
a little
things
timer.
in Christ who strengthens me.
We believe in you. You got a timer queued up for him, Stephanie?
Yeah,
all right,
finish
here we
the
go.
question. I'll start the timer.
All right, this question comes from Jonathan. Then you'll hear a beep for time for you to think, and then we'll get started. Okay, Jonathan says, I have some newer friends who have shared that they're having major financial trouble. I've encouraged them to seek out the classes Sandals Church offers, and I've been even offered for my wife and I to help meet with them. But it doesn't appear they're interested in seeking any help. It seems like a lot of this issue is pride. Any advice you can offer me to help my friend? Timer. Any advice you got for this guy?
Yeah, that's super annoying. Yeah, they're fools.
Oh, his friends are fools?
Yeah, they're fools. People that don't listen to advice, that aren't willing to change anything different and have all these, there's a word for that. There's fools. So There's a couple different types of sin. I want to talk about this in the next 2 weeks, but our debrief listeners are going to get the jump on this.
Preview.
So the first type of sin is ignorance. You don't know. The second type of sin is ignorance, and next is foolishness. You do know, but don't care. And the third type is evil. So we're gonna talk about that. And so the fool vacillates between those three: ignorance, foolishness, and evil. And so these individuals are not evil, but they are foolish. And so that's what pride is. Pride is the fool who has fallen in love with himself and not God. And so clearly they need help and they are not seeking it. But listen to me, guys. You can't help people that don't want help. If you try to help people that don't want help, guess who the fool is?
That's where you become a fool.
Boom. 58 seconds.
Wow.
Dude,
nice.
handled. Exactly. Yeah. Nailed it. All right. We got one more question for you. This one comes from Stephanie. You want to read this one?
I do. It comes from Catherine. And this is actually from your sermon a few weeks ago on how to be happy when you don't have enough money. She says, if a person tithes, takes care of his and his family's needs, and has more money left, how do you determine how much to give to others' needs and how much to spend on so-called extras?
Boom. Start the clock.
Yeah, I can't answer it.
Oh my goodness,
sorry.
is it going?
Why'd you turn off?
There it goes.
Okay, you guys totally failed this. Like,
We're trying to make it special.
yeah.
It's a super sport speed round. Catherine, does she spend money? How does she determine how much to spend on extras?
Yeah, there's not an answer for every question. I have no idea.
Okay.
She needs to get in a class, sit down with somebody, and go over her specific budget. Guys, some of you, so if you take the Real with Self workshop, she's probably a 1. And she's shoulding all over herself. So you're going to learn that in our Real with Self workshops. And
just for anyone who's freaking out, should, SHOULD.
Yes.
I should be doing this. I
should
should
be
be doing
doing
this.
this. I
There's no
shouldn't be
explicit
doing
tag
that.
on this podcast.
And
I know the struggle well.
So what was her name?
Catherine.
Catherine, you're saved by grace, not by works, lest any man or woman should boast, and just trust God in this. It sounds like you are incredible. Breathe deep, enjoy the grace of God, go outside and thank Jesus for the day. Because I'm guessing you are so far beyond everybody else at our church.
Great.
Have some fun, help some people, enjoy your life.
Enjoy life.
There you go. All right. Well, that was an excellent show, and you handled that one. Boom, 58 seconds again. And that includes our goofing off time at the beginning where we were messing with your brain.
That includes your guys' failures.
Yeah, exactly. You want to mentally quit or just mentally fire us?
No, I don't want to mentally fire anyone today.
Sounds well. We appreciate that, dude. All of us are living by grace.
Amen.
Well, there it is. That is all we got for the topic of money so far. If you've got questions about answers to questions, you can send those in. We'll hit them with some follow up in the future. You can send those questions into us at debrief.show. You can message us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Whatevs. We'll take your questions however you got them.
That's right. And you can check out the show notes for this show at debrief.show/78. We'll throw up the link to where to find our finance classes. We'll throw up some links to some of the things that Pastor Matt talked about. We'll have the link to the sermon. You can watch this episode on YouTube. We'll have the link there too. Everything you could possibly need related to this show. Debrief.show/77. Oh my gosh, I was wrong.
Exactly. And all of those of you who want to go beyond that tithe and give a little, go deep into your generosity and support what Sandals Church is doing here on the Debrief Show, you can do that by texting GIVE Debrief to 951-900-4120. That's GIVE Debrief to 951-900-4120. Every single week you guys do that. It is awesome.
Yeah, let me say something real quick on that. So my grandma died last year. She was 91 years old, became a Christian probably in her 40s. So she lived for Jesus for 50 years. When she died last year, she wanted a certain percentage of her income given to the church. And my mom actually decided to give, I think she gave us like $2,500 from her estate. And
to support the Debrief.
And my grandma was very poor. She didn't have a lot. And so, I mean, I think when they sold her house, they sold it for like $80,000. It was not a lot of money. Yeah. So she wasn't very wealthy, but
still more than I've ever given to the church.
But think
at
about
one
that.
time.
Some of you guys are being blessed right now in your car by a woman named Janelle Estes that you'll never meet, and yet her life is blessing you because of her generosity and her desire to honor God in her death. And so, anyways, I just want to give a shout out to my grandma. I know she's in heaven.
Yes.
And
exactly. Producer Kelly, wherever you are right now, just put your hand on that audio processing thing that Pastor Matt's grandma paid for. And you guys just know right now, Producer Kelly's hands are producing or showing love to that thing.
That's right. And if you actually
bringing
want
you the wisdom,
learn more about how to give here at Sandals Church, including estate giving, if you go to sandalschurch.com/give, we've got a bunch of information on there on how to automate your giving and who to contact if you want to talk through, what it looks like to give stuff long term. We've got people here who would love to help you figure that out. So go to sandalschurch.com/give. There's a lot of great resources on there too that you may not know about.
boom.